The following books will move from books recommended for younger readers to books recommended for older readers. The first book is The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. It was first published in 2005 by Disney Hyperion Books. It follows the story of Percy Jackson, the half-blooded son of Poseidon and his friends, as they attempt to track down Zeus's lightning bolt in order to prevent a conflict among the gods of Greek Olympia. When looking at this book, if you strip away the mythology, it's a straightforward mystery that young readers can really get into and follow easily. And for those who really get into it, they can later check into the Greek mythology to look into the gods and the monsters that appear in this book, such as Medusa, and then all the gods including Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, and read other stories, more of the classical Greek stories later on when they have more of an understanding of what's going on. This book is recommended for younger readers because it's straightforward and it's also part of a series. So if they enjoy it, they can continue the series to find out what happens to Percy Jackson and his friends. There are also currently 2 movies of this series that have been released. So either those that have read the book can see the movies and compare them and enjoy them both, or those that have seen the movies can come into the books and see where the story goes with Percy Jackson and all of his friends. The second book is titled Imprisoned: The Betrayal of Japanese Americans During World War II by Martin Sandler. It was published in 2013 by Walker Children's. This, even though it has somewhat of a heavy material, it's still recommended for 13 and 14 and up. It follows the lives of Japanese American citizens during the Second World War when they were sent to internment camps, and it follows their lives from just before, during, and slightly after their time in the internment camps, and they tell what they went through and how things were. I recommend this for the younger ages looking at the history because there's actually a lot that they can get from it, and it adds a new aspect to the history of the Second World War, specifically in the U.S. and in U.S. history, and it will add a new dynamic and a new idea of what was happening at the time in the U.S. Now, this book is highly recommended because it actually includes photographs, and the writing is simple enough for the young readers to get. And towards the end, actually, there are recommendations of places in the U.S. where you can go and learn more about the internment camps and what was happening at the time. Which again, where the author got some of his photographs, one of them being quite harsh, said, Japanese keep walking. It shows a harsh side of American history, but it presents it into a way that the younger audience can understand and handle. The next recommendation is a visual novel or a manga. It's called Beck, written by Harold Sakuishi. It was published in English by Tokyo Pop, with the first volume coming out in 2005. It follows a boy nicknamed Koyuki while he is in high school, and he begins the story like many high schoolers would be, not really thinking about the future, worried about what's happening immediately. That is until he hears someone playing guitar. The player of that guitar happens to be another high schooler named Ryusuke, who Koyuki later becomes friends with. This book or series handles a lot of things, but none of it is really outside of what young adults would be able to handle. It's just about high school life, rock music, developing emotions. Koyuki tries to work through his emotions for another character named Maho, and who turns out to be Ryusuke's younger sister. And they become closer throughout the series, but do have some problems. And outside of his relationship with them, Koyuki is also trying to work out his relationship with this new band that he's in with Ryusuke, along with Chiba, Taira, and Saku. And the story is about development, both emotionally and creatively in high school, because he's trying something brand new, something that he finally feels passion for. Because in the beginning of the book, he kind of describes his life as kind of being gray colored. There's not a lot going on until he's influenced by Ryusuke and begins to develop his emotions for Maho. The next book I recommend is called Book Girl and the Suicidal Mime. If you can get past the title, it's a supernatural mystery written by Mizuki Nomura, and it was published in 2010 by Yen Press, which is a subsidiary of Hachette. It follows the life of Konoha Inoue, who is a young man in high school who writes, and Toko Amano, who is a girl that can actually receive nourishment from eating literature. These two become involved in a mystery that they work through by thinking of literature and other books. In this book, the classic that's mentioned a lot is called No Longer Human. Now, the title is kind of dark, and the book mentioned is also very dark, but the result, things always work out in the end. There's always a nice laugh, and no one is ever hurt. And this book is recommended. It's recommended for 17 and up, because of its dark nature, and because there is a lot of classical literature mentioned, which can be used. This can be used as a springboard for the readers to go out and find these classics and read them and develop as readers throughout the time. And it mentions many books from many different countries, from German writers to French writers, British writers, Italian, American, Japanese. It mentions literature from across the globe. The last book also is very dark and only recommended for 18, maybe even 19 and up, and it's Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson. It's the story of Melinda, who is ostracized. She has no friends. No one talks to her because they all blame her for breaking up a party. Little do they know that Melinda is a rape victim, and worst of all, she actually has to see her rapist in her daily life. Now, this book might be heavy and dark, and it's definitely not going to be for everyone, but it does introduce them to a topic that it does happen, and sometimes it does need to be talked about. And one of the things with this book is that she eventually does speak up about what happened, which is something that sometimes needs to happen, that sometimes these uncomfortable topics do need to be brought up, and it's better to learn this while you're a young adult, because the things you do now, the things you do as a young adult, will affect the things that you do later as an adult. And by speaking up, she works through her emotional trauma, and it it really just it turns into a story of doing the right thing even though something terrible has happened.